All right. Hello. Okay, this is scary because I was not aware that after I made my YouTube channel, I had to wait 24 hours in order to go live. Um so I did kind of like a trial run where I pre-recorded the video and then I ended up not liking it. Um but now I'm actually live, so if I mess up or do something weird, um I can't go back. Anyway, welcome everybody to my first ever video on the deep dive with Thalia. My name is Thalia. It's like Dahlia pronounced with a TH in the front. Um, and yeah, this is my channel. So kind of like a little intro. I'm sure I'll give a better intro like later on. And I hope everybody can hear me. I am really interested in true crime. I think I've been interested in true crime my whole life, even as a kid. Um, and I think that a lot of times my curiosity stems from just wanting to know the whys of everything. I think a lot of people can relate to that. Um, and yeah, anyway, so this channel is mainly going to be about talking about true crime. I called it the deep dive because I do randomly get into deep dives about different things, not just, true crime trials and cases and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's going to be true crime because right now, the true crime sphere is buzzing, especially right now during the Vallow-Daybell trial, which is what we're talking about today. So anyway, like I said, I tried earlier in the weekend to make this video, and then I realized I had to wait 24 hours in order to actually live stream. So um I know it's a little bit late. I know that day one of the trial is already, or day two, or day one of week two of the trial has already started. So yeah, anyway. Um so let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first thing I wanted to talk about was the opening statements. Trina Kay gave an opening statement about Nephi and Laban, and that was her whole theme. And I feel like that was kind of um, I feel like a lot of people have talked about how there's not really a lot of conspiracy proof. And I really think that this text, this one, today I will be like Nephi, or tomorrow I would be like Nephi, I forgot what it said, is really the whole motive on what this case is about. So first of all, if any of you are not aware, I'm sure if you're watching this video, this is not the first time you're hearing about the Lori Vallow-Daybell trial, but if it is, it's a doozy. I definitely recommend going to somebody else's channel to actually hear a little intro about it. But yeah, if you're new and you're just I just randomly want to watch videos. First of all, I know that there's hundreds of channels on YouTube talking about this case, and I hope that what I will do here is just state the facts, give educated, not educated, but insightful opinions about what's going on, and just kind of talking about the human aspect. I feel like there's a lot of sensationalism in the true crime sphere, and people treat these cases almost like, the Hunger Games, almost like what's the, I don't know, like they're making people into celebrities and whatever. I just really want to humanize what's going on and realize that these are real people with real thoughts and real feelings, like all of us. Um, and that a lot of times there's more behind um, what goes on in crime, that's not, like a lot of people give the explanation of oh, they're just evil, or there's evil people out in the world. I like, yes, I know that these acts are evil, but I personally believe that there's more to it. And I think that a lot of the consuming of, at least what I watch in true crime, is based on that. So let me give you a little bit of intro on how I first heard about this crime. So very, very early on, back when the kids were missing, JJ and tylee, I did hear about some sort of doomsday cult. They were kind of like doing the whole doomsday cult mom aspect, and I really thought at the time that Chad and Lori were married for a while, and they had just gone off the deep end and went to Hawaii. I think that's the first and last time I heard about it for a while. Because as you know, it was back in 2020, 2019. COVID was going on. COVID had just started. Um, I'm sure like most of us were just trying to survive. And yeah, me included. So I really didn't dive into true crime because I really felt like we were living in the end times and not in reality. I don't believe in that. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, I didn't hear about it until the Delphi case started, the Delphi trial actually, the trial of Richard Allen. And I just somehow came across Lauren from Hidden True Crimes video talking about this case and going through the trial. And while I was waiting for day 1, day 2, day 3 to like be posted, I went to more of their videos, realizing that they were like they had started talking about the Daybell case. So um I dove into that, and I've been in it ever since. It's been like, you know, been a good while, a few months, and yeah, this is just one of those things that has captivated me, and I discover things every single day, and I discover new people, and yeah, it's been crazy to the point where like I've gotten my family invested in it. We've watched documentaries, we've watched YouTube videos, we talk about it like on the daily. So I'm really interested in this case. More so like on a religious level as well. So personal testimony, I'm not LDS. I grew up Catholic. Not Catholic anymore, but um I have a degree in religious studies. Now, this is one of those things where it's like I went to a liberal arts school and got a liberal arts degree that's like completely useless to what I'm doing now. Um but now, especially this because this case has a big religious and cult aspect, I can use that experience and that education to, you know, really look into this and really, look into the religious and belief aspect of it. Because that was kind of my MO, if you will. It's kind of a bad word, but I was really interested in how other people thought, how humanity got to where it is, based on religion and culture. So, and this, like a lot of people will say, this case really starts 200 years ago. Um, and so, yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about that more. Let's go ahead and talk about the trial. I think I went off on a tangent. For any of you who are like into really concise and uh, well thought out things or videos, this is not the one for you. I'm so sorry. I apologize. Um, but first, Trina Kay, which is the prosecutor in this case, um, started off with the Nephi text. Basically, Lori was texting her brother Alex saying that tomorrow I will be like Nephi. And when I read up about Nephi, because Nephi is in the Book of Mormon, um, I, I thought that it was in the Bible, but then I realized that there's very similar stories in the Bible. But basically, the gist of it is that there's a man named Nephi. He was known as this like humble, pious man. He was trying to get these brass plates from a commander named Laban. And I'm reading from my phone right now. He believes that these plates will be necessary for his descendants to preserve their culture and religion in the new land they will inhabit. So when Lehi's eldest son Laman meets Laban, he refuses to give up the plates and attempts to have Laman killed. Um, it isn't until the third night of the attempt, the youngest son Nephi encounters a drunken Laban passed out. And sorry, that's my water bottle. Let's under the directions from the Holy Spirit, Nephi reluctantly decapitates Laban with Laban's sword. So this is kind of a, and I realized I've just said some words that YouTube might not like, so I apologize. But yeah, ends Laban with his own sword, and then impersonates him in order to obtain the brass plate. So this is a story of justified killing, or justified unaliving, which I think you will realize this case is really, there's a lot of aspects of people who believe that they were justifyingly doing things, and it was God's will. So that's where I think this case really had the opening statement by Trina was really like a strong opener. I think stronger than a lot of people chalk it up to be. I think some people I've been watching a few videos where people are like, I don't really think that the prosecution has proven conspiracy. I really think that this religious aspect, and I hope that they'll talk about it a little bit more in the coming week, um, is just a really big part of the case. So yeah. Anyway, also apologies for me like watching the screen. I'm just making sure that like everything is good to go. But yeah, that was the first thing that like really stood out to me. As we know, we heard Lori's testimony. We heard, or not testimony, we heard her opening statement. Hers was mainly talking about how she's trying to push this narrative that Tylee was the one who provoked Charles with the bad, and that, I don't know, it's just really upsetting. But yeah, basically just trying to push this narrative that Charles was just this like really aggressive guy who could go up the deep end, and decided to, at that point, before he was dropping off his son JJ to school, decided to harness this bat and like destroy the entire family before he's taking JJ to school. I don't know. I mean, for us, a lot of people who know about this case and know what has happened after um, this Charles's ending, you'll realize how ridiculous that sounds. That is it just happened that like she said, these family tragedies just keep happening to her. She's the most unlucky person ever. So yeah, that was her opening statement. She started every single sentence with "the evidence will show," and that's why I put this as the title of my trial recaps. But yeah, it was just one of those things where it was just like, I'm glad. I mean, there were some objections, and I'm surprised that Lori did not object during the opening statements. I secretly think she didn't know she could do that. But yeah, it's just like, it was just an introduction that it's like, okay, we know where this is going. We know what this trial is going to be like. It's just going to be, a bunch of, this narrative that Tylee somehow was somebody who, provoked Charles in a way, because her relationship wasn't good with him. And it's just really sad because she if you've seen any of the interviews with Lori and Dateline, or Lori and Colby, sorry, I'm trying to like adjust myself, you'll realize that she has tried to push this narrative that Tylee was the one who basically ended her and JJ's lives, and just the fact that her action would somehow end up in the ending of Charles as well. It's just, I don't know, slap in the face to Tylee. And I really feel for that girl. Like, she's her story is just one of those ones. When Lori says family tragedies, I really think that her life, parts of her life, were just tragic, and I really wish that more people stood up for her when she was alive. But anyway, so that was just the opening statements. Now, I'm not going in order because I think when I was talking about these things, I would realize things, and then um, I don't know, I would add stuff. So we talked about the Nephi thing. Um, like I said, when I say I've watched like every single person on this case, um, and I do want to make a video eventually about the like who's who of this case, because there are a lot of family members, which I'm very appreciative of, who have commentated and talked about their different experiences, and used their, I guess, history in this family to really, like, I don't know, give us more insight. I really appreciate that. But yeah, when I tell you I watched 2 or 3 recaps a night when it comes to these trials, I really wish I would have been on this trial when Chad's trial was going on, because now I have to kind of do like backtracking. But yeah, so there's a few people who have said, like, I really think that like first of all, Lori's doing better than they thought she was, which I do agree. But also that when it comes to this conspiracy case, there's been a lot of evidence that, you know, this incident happened, but, very little conspiracy or evidence of conspiracy. Like I said, I disagree, but here's a few things that I just kind of think are important when it comes to proving the evidence of conspiracy. I really think that Adam's testimony was pretty strong when it came to, okay, Adam, like, Adam was there. Adam was supposed to go um, to meet Charles and, you know, intervene Lori when it came to her religious beliefs. And, you know, so I feel like that was really strong, especially when he personally said that, like, I believe that Lori and Alex conspired to end Charles. That's what I believed. So I really think that evidence is strong when it came to conspiracy. I know that it could be like a kind of hearsay, like, um, I really think that Lori tried to prove that Adam didn't really have um influence in her life, that they were not really close, especially during this time. And I want to talk a little bit more about that in a little bit, because there is an issue that just brought up this week in regards to that. But I really think that his testimony was, as far as like when it comes to civilian testimony, other than Kay's, actually all of the, I feel like most, like Kay, Nancy Joe, and um Adam were just really strong, as far as like leading up to this conspiracy. Um so yeah, I think that, like, it was pertinent. He also gave, like, I guess maybe because he was LDS, he gave the testimony about Laban and Nephi. Now, one thing that I'm curious about, and I'm not sure, like, are religious leaders considered experts? Now, I really don't believe that an LDS leader would actually testify in court. That's a big thing that the LDS church has kind of gone, um, has been under scrutiny for, is the fact that the LDS church is very tight-lipped when it comes to legal proceedings, and they will tell you to, if you're asked to testify in court, please contact our lawyers first. So again, maybe they just couldn't get an LDS leader who would actually speak out or speak up on this case. So they had to use Adam, who is still in the LDS church. But I just found it very curious that so far we've not really used any LDS experts. I guess you could say that people who have been in the religion for 50 years are experts. So, but yeah, like I think in Chad's trial, John Pryor used a police officer who was only LDS for 18 years and then converted. So yeah, I don't know. It just may be that some, like most people who are LDS don't really want to speak about this because they know where this is going. And they might see this as a betrayal to their faith, which I guess I get. I do appreciate the people who are LDS or used to be LDS, who talk about this case and how the religion has kind of affected what's going on. But I do understand that if you are in the faith, um, still actively in the faith and you believe in it, I could see how that's hard to testify to, saying that you can kind of tell how reluctant Adam was to talk about it. And I don't think he addressed that in his Silver Linings podcast, but he did say that it was one of those things where I think most of the people who testified and have talked about it after have said it's kind of one of those like surreal moments where you see Lori for the first time, this person who's your sister, and you haven't seen her in like 5 to 8 years. I was very unclear on the timeline of like when Adam last saw her, but I guess when the last time is when he ate her enchiladas, who he forgot anyway. And yeah, I think after the testimony, he went on his own podcast called Silver Linings with Rex Connor. Rex Connor is Janice's brother. So you have two family members who have a podcast who talk about this case. And he said that like he really didn't remember the green chili chicken enchiladas. He really didn't remember seeing when the last time he saw Lori was. And you know what? I can kind of believe that. I think a lot of people have said like Adam knows a little bit more than he's he's kind of leading to, and I get that to a degree, um, but sometimes I do see, like, Adam's mannerisms, and he just seems a little bit dissociative when it comes to this stuff, so I don't think he's intentionally trying to say, like, "I wasn't there." I just really think that, like, maybe he hasn't processed what has been going on, and he's very avoidant when it comes to, pinning him down to certain facts and pinning him down to certain, um, like, events. So, I don't know. I'm kind of like 50-50 when it comes to, like, Adam knows more than he's leading to, and then just the fact that, like, Adam probably doesn't wanna remember. And listen, 2 things could be true at the same time. I think that for a lot of these family members, like I said, these people are real people, and I could not imagine what he was going through having to testify on the stand against your sister and then be questioned by her. That is something I could never imagine. And you can kind of tell, like, for people who have siblings, seeing, his face and his demeanor when he was talking to her, um, it was just, it was a little sad, for people who have siblings, like, you'll realize, like, you can kind of put yourself in his shoes and realize, like, this sucks. This would suck for sure. So yeah, there's Adam. Nancy Jo Hancock, I feel like, was the star of week one. Well, actually, Kay, maybe her and Kay are kind of neck and neck. But Nancy Jo Hancock was somebody who went on a date with Charles the night before his life ended, and she met him on an LDS dating site and just kind of talked about, what they talked about before and during the date. They talked for hours, and, Charles was really, like, proud of his of JJ, and talked about him all the time and was really excited to see him. And you know, and we know how, all know how that ended, but basically he was talking about how he had changed the insurance policy to his sister Kay Woodcock, because Lori was the beneficiary, and he just believed at this point that their marriage was not going to work out and that they were on the ends. Obviously, he was dating people, so he believed even though he did love Lori and did say that he talked very highly of Lori, he just knew that he had to move on. And I think that a lot of people will be like, "Oh, this is very just suspicious that he's going on a date right, not even during his divorce." But I think you'll realize, like, with a lot of, like, high demand religions, or people who are in faiths that are very marriage centered, getting married is very important. So I've seen a lot of people who have, divorced and then got married right off the bat, and I think that that's probably what he was going to do, if he lived. But but yeah, so I don't know, that testimony, the "don't flatter yourself" line, was gold, and I appreciate that Nancy Jo Hancock came out and talked about Charles, and really, for the first time, I think, humanized Charles in a way that we didn't see, yet, at least, and, until we got into Kay's testimony. Serena Sharp, and now, listen, I didn't even write down, um, where's her name? Christina Atwood, because she was so, I think maybe I don't remember it because, I think the audio went out for, like, 30 minutes, and I just forgot to go back and, like, watch it, um, when it was brought back. But her and Serena Sharp, I just feel like they're both one and the same. It's almost the same as the Melanie Gibb testimony in the Chad and Lori trials. It's just one of those things that upsets me so much. I think it's just annoying, and also just aggravating, or not aggravating. Words escape me a lot of times. It's just, yeah, let's go with annoying. Just see these women who are just these, like, LDS, I think Annie Cushing's described them as, like, uh, Handmaid's Tale speaking, like, women who are lying through their teeth, who testify that they have this conviction and this relationship with God, and they still, all of them have this faith in God and believe that, um, they are living by his, his word, but then lie through their teeth, which is not very Christian, not very LDS. But I think a lot of them, I feel, maybe are just embarrassed by what they did, and how they acted during this time. Um, I'm sure that there is some guilt, but it just really upsets me when the prosecutors, questioning them, a lot of times the answer is, I don't recall, I don't recall. When the waters get rough, they always revert to, I don't recall, especially Serena Sharp. I was just like, girl, there is proof that you were there on these Zoom calls. You were doing these castings. This girls' weekend was not just a time for you to come down and say prayers and do service projects. Like, you were literally trying to cast out quote unquote evil spirits from Charles. And you do recall. I think you're just embarrassed by it. And you know what? I feel like in hindsight, it's kind of like one of those things where you're trying to remember, um, things that you're trying to forget things that you've done, in your past. I think a lot of these women are just, I would be embarrassed of this like mighty Mormon Power Rangers type, like, like stuff that they did, like literally like using these like weird powers to cast out evil spirits and believing that they, were going into translation or whatever. So I get that they're embarrassed. I just really wish that they would suck it up and swallow their pride and testify to the truth and just say, like, this is something that we did, but I don't believe in this anymore. Or I don't, or maybe they do believe in it. Maybe that's why they're not talking about it. Because at the end of the day, this is justice for Charles. This is not about hurting your pride. And I maybe they're afraid of like prosecution after this, but as we've seen, especially after the Chad Daybell trial, we have not seen a single person who most of us think believe, like Melanie Gibb or Melanie Boudreau, the Melanies, we believe that they have more to do with these cases, by looking at the FOIA docs, by looking at all of the evidence, and they've not been prosecuted. So I think if they have fear of prosecution or fear of perjury, like I just think that that's never going to happen. So I really wish they would, be a little bit honest with themselves, but maybe they just don't have that capacity. So yeah, that's what I have to say about those two people. I it was just one of those things. Also, just the whole Bible off, it like with Serena Sharp and Lori, it reminded me a lot of the whole Cora horror talk when Melanie and Lori were talking on the phone. And it was just like, do you believe in God? And like Serena's like, yeah, of course. Like, and it's just like, you'll testify to God. And you know what? To a point, I believe that now this wouldn't benefit Lori. So I don't know why. I think a lot of times she's just trying to prove a point just to say she's right. I really don't think she understands that like some of these things could incriminate her. But Serena, she was claiming that Serena like believes in God, but then is not telling the truth and is lying. And I agree with Lori in that one. I know that's something that most people would not want to say, but it was just funny, the fact that they're just having this like little like Bible off, trying to talk about things without saying things, and I don't know. It was interesting to watch. Also, just kind of like, okay, this is a conversation that could have been done, um, you know, in jail, not on the stand. I think a lot of the questions by Lori were just her trying to figure out the tea, who was talking about her, um, who still talks to who. Like, she was really trying to get the hot goss when it came to all her friends that she hasn't talked to in 5 years. Um, but yeah, it was a little cringy, honestly, or a lot of cringy, honestly. But yeah. So Kay Woodcock, I really feel like, again, her testimony was great. And I really feel for her that just the fact that she's lost, you know, Tylee and JJ, or Tylee, JJ, and Charles, um, in this situation. And it's just really brave that she got up on the stand and just testified to what she believed. And I find it so interesting because I think a lot of us believe that, Lori is a narcissist and Lori is a psychopath and doesn't have feelings. But just the fact that she was shaking on the stand, it just being super, like, you could tell she was tripping over her words and she was trying to be really careful. Like, I really think that she knows that Kay could incriminate her more and bring up things that she doesn't want to, or open up doors that she doesn't want to open. Um, so I just thought it was really interesting that she only asked Kay 3 questions. She did talk about how in her interview she wanted to confront the people that lied about her, but I really think that um, end of week 1, Lori has realized that maybe she bit off more than she could chew. I mean, representing yourself, I think most people will agree, not a good idea, but I really think she thought this would be a walk in the park and she could just go on the stand and just, prove everybody wrong. But, um, I think she's finding out that that's not the case. And Kay especially is not going to let her slander anybody's name more than she has already. Let me move my microphone really close. My back is starting like hurt because I'm leaning forward too much. I have like a boom arm that I bought that my microphone can sit on. I just haven't set it up. I figured if I set it up, I wouldn't have time to do this. So yeah, you have those testimonies, and those, I was kind of disappointed to see these were the only civilian testimonies. Most of the other ones are going to be experts in law enforcement. Really hoping they'd bring in a few more people, but maybe because they don't want to, like I said, open up doors that they don't want to open, that they want to keep closed, especially like in regards to the Idaho trials. Maybe that's why they didn't bring anybody up. Um, but yeah, their testimonies were pretty good. Um, so one thing that heard, and I've just heard speculation or, people talking about their observances at the trial. What does the jury think? And that's my big question. Because we've already kind of had a few jury snafus. We've had 2 jurors dismissed for different reasons. And I honestly believe that the voir dire was a little bit shorter than it should have been. I feel like they maybe should have vetted these people like a little bit more. Because the last thing we want is a mistrial due to jury. Like, wasn't it the Casey Anthony case? I believe Casey Anthony or Jodi Arias, where they had to dismiss a few jurors, and it was just like, or maybe, you know what? It might have been the O.J. Simpson case. That's what I'm thinking about, where like there were just so many jurors who like knew more than they said they did, and then they ended up having to like dismiss them, and I don't know. Anyway, I just feel like the the easiest way to avoid a mistrial would be to maybe spend more time selecting your jury. I mean, maybe they did. I was not there, so but I don't know. From what I've heard, a lot of the jury just seems very bored, and like I said, maybe, they seem bored, but they're really listening. But yeah, I don't know. And I think one of the biggest insights was Tom Evans. Tom Evans was a juror in the first Lori trial, and he did a interview with, I believe, East Idaho News, and they just kind of talked about like, what are you thinking? Like from your juror perspective, like, what do you think about this trial? And he just said, like, I think it was the day that they had the latent fingerprint um expert. He was just like, well, we got this like, long uh lesson on latent fingerprints, and then it didn't really go anywhere, and then we found out that there was no conclusive fingerprints, so it was just like one of those things where you know I mean, I get why in trials you have to be very thorough and you have to understand, or you have to make the jury understand certain things, but um that just was kind of funny that he's been in a jury before. He is convicted Lori already of a crime, and him believing that there's just certain parts of these trials that are kind of mundane, scares me a little bit. But like I said, like most trials are not really going to be these like theatrical things. So maybe that's a little bit of reassurance that, like, they could be on like a tax fraud, trial. I mean, there's some fraud in this trial, but you know, I don't know. If I was a juror, and maybe this is just projection, but like if I was a juror, I'd be so invested in this case. I personally, I honestly believe that I probably wouldn't be asked to be on a jury now that I have watched so much about true crime. Um, but I just feel like if I was a jury, like when people talk about wanting to avoid jury duty, I'm like, sign me up. So yeah, I don't know. Anyway, that was just one of those like interesting things that I thought about. Um, Now, I think we've seen a lot of. Oh, sorry, my water bottle. Um, okay, sorry, my mouth is getting dry. Lori saying my husband in regards to Charles. This is interesting because in the first two interviews that she did, one with Dateline and then the second one with something Arizona. I forgot. Um, she refers to herself as, or and then also she did a motion to call her Miss Lori Daybell, not Lori Vallow-Daybell. And she talks about you know that Chad is still her husband. They're still like not happily married, but like committed to each other, which I believe may be a little bit one-sided now. but but then in this trial, you see this just juxtaposition of herself calling Charles her husband, and this really just leads to the question of does she one is this like a polygamous thing? Does she believe in polygamy? Does she believe that both these men are her husband? Or is she trying to say my husband because she's trying to prove ownership over Charles and she wants the jury to think that she really loved Charles and that, yes, she did marry Chad. Yeah, she did have an affair, but it's not really doesn't mean she didn't love him still. I don't know. I think that's I really think the last one is what she's trying to prove. Um, But it's just I don't know, it just really slapped in the face, especially to Kay. I think Kay talked about how she was like, "I am so tired. I really wish I could just tell her to stop calling Charles my husband." Also, at one point, she called Kay her sister-in-law. And I know I keep fidgeting with this. I'm very sorry. Anyway. um, and it's just like maddening because it's like you literally, I mean, allegedly, conspired to, you know, end their Charles's life, and you it's in this trial especially, you're dragging his name through the mud, and then to go on and call him my husband, like, it's just one of those things. Also, too, I think what Lori doesn't realize, and maybe this is only something that real normal people will realize, not to say she's not a real person, because then I think she'd be like, "Well, do you think I've translated?" Anyway, but I think she doesn't realize that the natural human reaction, if you really, let's pretend that Lori didn't commit this crime, which I don't believe at all. But if she really, if this really was a family tragedy and she believed that, you know, it was, this was an accident, you know, you would, you would testify to the fact that you loved him. And we have not seen that at all. I think she realizes that most people, if you didn't commit this crime, you would say, like, I would never do this to my husband. I love him, and he was a father to my children, and I cared about him. And yes, we had our differences, and yes, I cheated on him or whatever, but those were just mistakes. And at the end of the day, we loved each other. I really think that Lori doesn't understand that that's what a normal human person will do. And so she's pushed this narrative that like he was aggressive, dragging his name through the mud, and then thinking that saying my husband is going to convince the jury that, um, she loved him or whatever. But I'm like, no, you actually have to say the words. I don't think once you've ever said, I loved my husband. I loved Charles. Charles was a great person. That, I mean, not giving Lori advice because she's already in too deep anyway, but that's the path that most people would do, I think. And I think we've seen that in a lot of conspiracy to unalive people cases when it comes to spouses. And she just doesn't get that. I really don't think that she understands that in order to say I didn't conspire, you have to love the person. You have to actually like value them as a person. um, and also just have a little bit of animosity, especially like, you know, when your brother is the one who did it. But yeah, that's just one of the things. Like Lori does not know how to human a lot of the time, and you know what? That's gonna work to her disadvantage. I'm not mad about it because honestly, what can you do? Um, okay. How do people talk like the song? My mouth is so dry. Okay. Um, all right, we're almost halfway through actually. This is great. Okay, so um oh yeah, I wrote is it possession or delusion? Um I think maybe it's a little bit of both. Who knows? Maybe she thinks she genuinely believes that she didn't unalive her kids, so maybe she genuinely believes that this was just a family tragedy. Um Now I did see so many narcissistic traits in Lori's questioning, especially with Serena Sharp. I think she realized that, when it came to Kay and Adam, she couldn't really manipulate them. So when it came to the, seven gatherer type of people, she was trying to test the hold that she had. And as I feel like Serena was probably the weakest link as far as testifiers go. Um, so there was just a few manipulative tactics that I saw that I was just like, okay, this is crazy. And now for any of you who are like, you've maybe watched Adam's testimony or Adam's podcast, you know, I think a lot of her family still believe that she was just this wonderful person, wonderful mom until she snapped. I personally, um, and not that this is like a side thing because I genuinely enjoy all of these family members' channels, but just Megan Connor has a lot of insight on, and she's Lori Vallow-Daybell's first cousin, Rex Connor's niece. That's why they have the same last name. Fellow San Antonio White, Megan. First of all, we love you. We have a you have a supporter here in very close to home. But I I really have learned a lot about this case through her testimony of how Lori was. Um, you know, and I think the main two, if there was content that I think you should watch when it comes to understanding why criminals are the way they are, especially in this case, Megan's content, just, you know, her experiences living with Lori and just, pointing out the narcissistic traits that she has, um, especially in trial, has really helped out. And then also if you want to, let's sidebar to Chad. If you want to learn about that, I think the Heather Daybell interview is really insightful when it came to understanding Chad as a person. Um, yeah, because a lot of times when I talk to my family members about this case, a lot of them are like, why did they even do this? Why did this happen? And, you know, they'll be like, "Oh, they're evil," and I'm like, "Yeah, they're evil, but also I really think that there were a lot of signs before anybody like even had an inkling that this would ever go on." So anyway, that was a little tangent. But here's a few narcissistic traits that I saw, especially during the Serena Sharp questioning. I feel like she was very manipulative when it came to um, her trying to almost like trip up Serena's memory. She, Serena in prosecution questioning testified to the fact that they did do castings. Um, I think she denied there were Zoom calls, but she did say that they had a girls' weekend where they did a casting on Charles. Um, and then Lori, who was trying to prove that she I don't know. It was weird. She was trying to prove that she was lying, but also to the fact that maybe she didn't remember it correctly. And I think that that's where the manipulation came in, where she was just like, I forgot the questioning and I was going to pull it up. I just didn't. have time, or confidence that I would successfully present this video, without something going wrong. So I just recommend going back to, like, her questioning, Serena, but, um, her saying, "Do you maybe think that what you experienced wasn't," she said something along the lines like, "Do you think maybe what you saw you could have been mistaken by what you saw," or something like that. Like, basically, like, "Do you think maybe we didn't actually do a casting?" So that was basically the question she was trying to ask. And Serena was like, luckily, like, Serena stood her ground a little bit. She's like, "No, I remember this certain thing that happened." And but Lori was really trying to push to be like, "Do you maybe think that, like, you can go back and say, like, I lied?" Thankfully, I think there was a few objections that didn't allow for her to say that. Also, I'm gonna take my headphones off because yeah, I'm hot anyway, and I'm not actually listening to anything. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It was just like one of those things where I was just like, this girl is so manipulative. Like, oh my god, like, it's crazy. Um, Also, just the fact that she kept saying, like, "What do I say? What did I say exactly?" Like, she had this to several people. Like, could you repeat verbatim this one thing that I said 5 years ago? I allegedly said. First of all, if it's verbatim, that means that it actually happened. And then also, I don't know. Who remembers those? I mean, maybe I would remember those things, especially if it came to conspiring to, unalive a family member or something. But it was just like one of those things where I remember. And listen, this is like a personal experience that maybe I'll talk about later on. But I was in a coercive, controlling relationship with a narcissist for 3 years, and um, that was one of those tactics that, when we had arguments or when I would bring up, like, "I don't like this thing that you did to me," or I don't like this thing that you said, they'd be like, "Well, what did I say exactly?" Or, if I was trying to argue a point, they would be like, "Oh, well, what does that exactly say?" And of course, because I don't have Google, like, at the ready, at this dinner or whatever we're doing, a lot of times they thought that they had the upper hand because it's like, I don't personally remember. Also, too, when you're in these relationships, when you're friends or, partners with people who are narcissists, you have this trauma brain where it literally felt like my brain was Swiss cheese a lot of the times. Like, I was like, I don't remember anything. My memory out the door. So yeah, it's very manipulative to be like, what did I say exactly? Maybe I should put the camera down a little bit. I'm just afraid it's gonna fall. Okay, sorry. Okay, because when I keep going, I'm like off camera. Like I said, I will hopefully get a better setup with the microphone. I wanted to make this video. Also, hello Insomnia crew. It's 12:30. You'll find that most of my videos will probably be made late at night because that's kind of where when I think the best. If it wasn't for the standard of like the world and just the fact that most things are open during the day, I would probably be like more of a night owl. But I don't know. Anyway, um, if nobody's watching this right now, so like if you're on the rewatch crew, just know that it's 12:30 in the morning. I don't really think that well, if you're in my area, like, most people have healthier sleeping habits than I do. So welcome if you're overseas or, somewhere else where it's a little bit earlier. Yeah, anyway. Um so yeah, manipulation, her being like, "What did I say exactly? Like, did I can you testify to the fact that maybe you were mistaken?" Like, that was one of those things that I was just like, "Oh my god," like, she's really trying to gaslight these people on the stand in front of the jury. I don't think that's going to work to her favor. Most of these things that she says is not gonna work to her favor, but, whatever. Also just the fact that she said, "Did you see it? Did you see it? Were you there?" She ended, most of the witness, questioning with, "Did you personally see me conspire to unalive my husband?" And, of course, no. Most of these people were not in the room or in the state, like, unless you were Alex. Also, most of the people who probably saw her conspire are not alive anymore anyway. Um, I don't know. Anyway, so there's a few questions I have. Oh, and I also just kind of want to note, because I think this has come up in the last few days. Um, there's been a few, I don't want to say drama. Again, I don't like when people sensationalize these trials, and, to an extent, we can have a little fun. Like, obviously, if you don't laugh, you'll cry kind of thing. I can personally say that I showed me and my parents, and a few of my family members, the chicken we watched the Nancy Joe testimony, and we were laughing when she said, "Don't flatter yourself." So I get that like, there's a lot of times where it's like, we're all human, there's just these comical things, especially, like, during the motions when, Judge Borefsky would just, like, look at the stand, or look at the camera directly, like The Office. Like, it was just, like, one of those things where it's like, "Oh my god, if this wasn't real life, this would be funnier." But yeah, anyway, so I don't wanna say drama, just because it's not like a YouTuber apology drama thing. It's not like the Charles and whatever Char what is his name? Maybe I shouldn't have said Charles. Anyway, um, not a big pop culture person, so cannot remember what that controversy was. Anyway, um, but there was a little bit of, what is it, like, when you, not agitation, butting of heads, let's just say that, with a few family members in this case. So after, like I said, I watched Adam's podcast with Rex Connor, and he just talked about how, um, he said something along the lines. I forgot what they were bringing up. It was something about what Megan said. Like, oh, they were believing, like, do you believe that, like, maybe Alex did something to Stacy? And you know what? These are questions that I'm surprised they answered. Um, I think most of the time it was Rex who was bringing these things up. I feel like Rex is a little bit more open to, like, investigating the family, even though he still is kind of in the church, and but like I said, like, a lot of these family members are going through things, and, like, there's they have their own methods of grieving and, processing this trauma. So, um, don't blame them. But Adam said something along the lines of, like, I I I remember that Megan said something about this, and, like, let's just remember that, like, I think he said 99% or 90, and it was just like, oh, that was, like, one of those things that was just like, wow. Especially since, because after Adam's testimony, I feel like that was one of the most emotional times for Megan during this trial. Like, she actually said that she was, like, crying, and, like, trying not to think about it too much, because she wanted to go back into the courtroom, and, it's really affected her. And she really felt for Adam, and she stood up for Adam, even though she knows that Adam doesn't agree with half the things that she says. Um, oh yeah, and Adam said something along the lines of, like, I know that Megan and I don't agree with, like, certain things. He's like, but just remember that, like, 90% or 99% of what Megan says isn't true. And he said this, like, several times. And he said something along the lines of, like, she was not there. She was not there. I don't remember her. She only lived with us for 1 week, which Megan said was, like, 3 months. And again, this is where it comes to, like, the fact that I think sometimes Adam has not processed most of what's going on, and you can just kind of tell when they, like, like, in his podcast, he's just very, like, dissociative, and he, like, answers a lot of questions with, "Oh, I don't know. I don't remember. That's interesting." So I really do I believe, like I said, this is not a side thing, this is not a controversy. I believe Megan's testimony when it comes to this stuff, and I support her, and I obviously, like, it sucks that, during this trial, this is something that you should probably put all your emotional energy in, and now you're kind of having this little thing where your cousin is telling you that, like, your experiences aren't valid. Um, but it was just one of those things that was, like, upsetting. It's like, she supported you. She literally went on there and said, like, "Yes, Adam and I have our differences, especially with religion and the family dynamic, but, I love Adam, support Adam, he did great on testimony." She's done that with Colby, all these family members that she doesn't really talk to, but she, like, she acknowledges they exist. And, for Adam to just say, like, what she said was not true. Everything he said, like, everything she says is not true because she wasn't there. Just reminded me a lot of what Lori was trying to prove in court, saying, were you there? You weren't there, so you didn't personally see me conspire. That's just the same thing, and maybe it's just a family thing. Maybe it's just, like, kind of how this family works, and like I said, I'm not trying to vilify Adam. I think that, like I said, these people are humans, and they have to process this, and I find that, you know okay, I'm not gonna make that point, but yeah, I don't know, it's just kind of upsetting, and I think Megan had said she's gonna address this a little bit more. There was also a little bit of a tiff with, Annie Cushing's, um said something about, like, that Tylee wasn't at Colby's wedding, and then Colby made a whole video being like, "You weren't there, like, you need to stop testifying." And listen, like, I think sometimes maybe because Annie Cushing's is and Annie Cushing's is Tylee Ryan's aunt, by the way. Maybe like I said, I'm gonna do, like, another video where I talk about all these people, because when I first heard about this case, I didn't know that any of these people were on YouTube. So, um, when I think Annie goes there's like a spectrum, right? It's like super analytical, and her name her I think her other YouTube channel was like Analytics. So, and she's an analyst, like, so it's like she goes on to the, like, this is the fact, like, almost like making this case like it's very data heavy. And that's what she said. She said, like, I provide receipts, I provide links, I provide facts. Like, like, this is I'm going through the FOIA docs. Like, she's developing an app to, like, go through the FOIA docs and, like, check herself and all that stuff. So she's on this spectrum of, like, super analytical. And then we have on the other side, I feel like maybe Adam and Rex are on this side where it's like they're more so just expressing their experience and emotion, and they're not looking at anything else. And then in between you have Megan Connor, who is, like, super into, like, the emotional aspect of being in this family, but also just kind of like there were signs, and this is what a narcissist does, and this is what a family dynamic, like, how this can lead to this. So it's like, she's somewhere in between, and then you have Kresha, who's like very analytical when it comes to the religious aspect, but also, like, she's very human. And anyway, I'll like I said, I'll make a better video about this later. But yeah, it's just I think there was a little bit of tiff between Annie and Colby, and I'm not sure why Colby addressed this now. I think maybe because he had a few people questioning him. And I think now, like, Colby in the beginning was very much like, we'll talk about these things, but we're not going to go too deep. I think at one point he even said he was done talking about Lori. But when this trial came, I think he's realized, that he's more invested in this now, and he's in the headspace to finally look at the facts. And so I think maybe in one of his videos, somebody questioned, like, was Tylee actually at your wedding? And he was just kind of like ticked off. And listen, I get it. I get why you would think that, like, why are people questioning these things? Like, this is not a big conspiracy, blah, blah, blah. And I do believe that Tylee was at his wedding. And the way he described it was that at his wedding, Lori tried everything to sabotage what was going on. She would run away for like an hour or so when she was supposed to do Kelsey's hair. She like, she booked the photographer at the wrong time. She did this. Like, she made Alex the photographer for, like, the after party, and, like, he did a horrible job. I really think that she was trying to be the monster-in-law. I'm really surprised that she didn't do more to sabotage the wedding, to be honest, because this was really like Colby was Colby was g- going to convert to Christianity, like, an evangelical Christian faith, not a denominational, I believe, and not be LDS. And I'm, like, very surprised that Lori didn't, like, make a bigger deal out of this. But you'll realize that a lot of things she did I think she's so schemy. She's so, like, slimy when it comes to this stuff, but she tried to sabotage Colby's wedding. And I think one of the parts of it was her maybe scheduling Tylee to not be there. Because I believe that they said that she was at some sort of trip or something like that. And I think that maybe there was a little bit of like, dishonesty when it came to like them testifying in the beginning, like where she was. But I think mainly it was just more so embarrassment, especially because Tylee's not here anymore. And, to not have like your sister at your wedding, it's just, really sad. Um, so yeah, I think there's, a little bit of truth that maybe there was some dishonesty. I'm not going to testify anymore to that because um, don't know much about it. I did watch Annie's video, but I watched so many videos so far that none of these facts are like sticking out of my head. Um, but I do believe that Tylee was there, and yeah. Anyway, there was a little bit of a snafu with that, and Colby did say he's like you weren't there most of the time. And listen, like I said, like Annie is not. And maybe I should make a bit more video. Like I said, I don't want to make this like a drama channel or something when it came to true crime, but um Annie's experiences are valid. Listen, she lost her brother, and I feel like she's kind of in the same woods as like Kay is, where it's like, we are both connected with this person who conspired or possibly conspired to end our brother's lives, and she is devastated by that. And also just the fact that she was developing a relationship with Tylee when she visited after Joe Ryan's death, and could see like a lot of these like really like just see how great of a person Tylee was and could be, and just to lose that. And she's turned a lot of her grief into like finding the facts and trying to find the truth, because to be honest, there was a lot of mess ups when it came to family members and law enforcement and stuff. So I get why she's using her grief to dive into this, but I think maybe a lot of it can kind of be seen as like insensitive to people, like I said, on the other side of the spectrum, who are like, listen, like this is my family, like this is who would want to even be involved in this. And Annie has said she's not taken a single penny from this tragedy, and she's right now in Arizona, on her own dime, and she's not using this for clout. But I could see how some family members are just kind of like off put by that, especially Colby, who's just now, like I said, learning to just learning about this stuff. There's a lot of things, there's a lot of details that he is just now learning that we have known, and I can only imagine how devastating it is, especially because he's lost everybody. He's lost his mom, he's lost his dad, he's lost JJ, Tylee. It's, I don't know, it's just sad. But yeah, I'm really hoping that and I watched a little bit of Megan Connor's recap today. I didn't watch all of it yet, but she did say that like she was going to address these things, and I hope that she seems to have a good head on her shoulders, and she seems to be like very confident in what she believes. So I don't think she's gonna let this like um affect her that much. But yeah, I can only imagine your family members on in front of thousands of people being like, what she says isn't true, and then just like kind of getting some sort of backlash from it. Anyway, I feel for these people. I really do. I think that what drew me to this a lot too was just like having to confront these things in your family, because all of our families are not perfect, and there's to an extent a little bit of dysfunction in every family, and just kind of seeing this on like a international level is crazy. Okay, how long are we? Oh, we're at an hour. Okay, so this is crazy. I'm almost done, by the way, and I have to probably go to sleep so I can go to work tomorrow. Fun times. One of the questions I had was, will the prosecution bring in Charles's video? I feel like Charles's video where he says, like, I think that, like, I love my wife, but like, she's done this, she's done this, she's done this. I really think that could prove conspiracy. And now they've brought some videos up today, so maybe they will. But somebody did say that they probably won't bring it in because it kind of paints the police in a bad light. And like, obviously the prosecution's like on the side of the police. And like, again, like again, it's like at that point where I'm like, okay, can the police just like suck it up and maybe swallow their pride a little bit and be like, okay, maybe this is more beneficial to convicting Lori than it is to just save us from a little bit of embarrassment. Because like there's a lot of protection on police when it comes to this kind of stuff. They could be sued. Kay. I don't think Kay would do that because I think Kay's the only person. Maybe Kay and her siblings are the only people who could do that, but nothing's going to come out of it. You know, police have a lot of protection when it comes to you know wrongdoings. But I really hope that they show that video because that's one of those things that's like, if I was a jury, that would just be heartbreaking to watch him, literally try to plea for his life, and just like this is what Lori's doing, and then ultimately find out that like he's not alive anymore. Um, but maybe I don't know. I didn't really hear anything in the opening statements about that. Um, so I don't think they're gonna bring it up. That was just oh my god, this is like the first thing I wrote, and I forgot that I wrote this. Um, the sunglasses. So people were like saying that in the opening statement, Trina K said, "Well, um, Alex, who claimed to have gotten hit in the head with a bat and was also doing this like aggressive CPR, had his sunglasses on his head when he walked out." And now this, I'm an Aquarius, okay? Um, I'm one of those people who's like, "Oh, I saw this before, it was cool." That was one of the first things. I think it was like when we were watching like Sins of Our Mother. I watched that video and I commented and I said, "Why does if he really got hit in the head with a bat, why would he still have his sunglasses on his head?" Um, and so many people were like, "I just realized this after Trina K said it. Like, how did I watch this video several times and like just realize this?" I did realize this very early on, but one thing I didn't realize was so in Lori's testimony, and listen, I would not trust Lori when it comes to what happened. But if she's trying to prove that Charles was yelling, right, and woke up Tylee and Charles, and she said, I think something along the lines of the evidence will show that like Charles woke up Tylee and Alex who were still asleep, and like Alex didn't even have a shirt on or something like that. Like she said something like he was pulling up his jeans, which I was like, that was so weird to say. Um, why would he have sunglasses on his head? Like he put a shirt on somehow. Like he put a shirt on at some point. In between, pew pewing somebody um and then doing CPR. I guess just to look nice for the police. I don't know. And then puts the sunglasses on top of his head. Now, like you could argue maybe that like I've seen him several times have his sunglasses on his head, and the reason I notice this is because I don't like the way it looks. Like I think it looks kind of weird. Like I don't know, like just his bald head with his sunglasses on it. I don't know. But why would you have your sunglasses on your head if you just woke up? Like, do you sleep with your sunglasses? Like, is he like Arthur, where he like sleeps in his clothes? I don't know. Anyway, um, Arthur doesn't sleep in his clothes. I don't know why I said that. It's just like that's another like if Lori's trying to say that like she was the only one awake because JJ or also JJ was the only one awake. He went to go pick up JJ, put JJ in the car, came back because he didn't have his phone, because Lori stole it for some reason. And then he's yelling at Lori, and Tylee came out with a bat, and Alex came out to see what was going on. Why would he have his sunglasses on his head if he had just woken up? That's my question. I mean, it's also like if you got hit in the head with a bat, why would you even have sunglasses on your head? Or, if you're doing CPR, I can barely keep my sunglasses on my head when I'm doing normal stuff. That was another reason why I was like, I thought it was weird that like he had sunglasses on his head because it's almost like they're glued to his head. I don't know. Maybe they are, and that's why he had his sunglasses on his head. Anyway, I also want to know what, like, and this is maybe a question I'll never get because they never, maybe, like I said, maybe they do have like, some sort of doctor who will testify to them examining Alex's wound, but how did he get that wound? There was no blood anywhere in the house that was Alex. I mean, they also did not test a lot of the blood. We'll just, you know what, frustrating. Um, but did he like he didn't hit his head with the bat because there was no blood or DNA on the bat. Did he like go outside and like scratch his head against the corner of like the house or something? Like I really want to know. And maybe that's why it took him 45 minutes to call. I mean, I also think he wanted to make sure that like Charles would not survive, but how did he get that wound on his head? I really wanna know. I really wanna know. And that's just, like, one of those little details that I'm like, I don't think I'll ever know. Um, but yeah, anyway, that was just, like, one of the questions I had, and the sunglasses, I'm glad I remembered it because that was, like, the main thing I wanted to start off with, and somehow I just didn't remember. Um, Last thing is, some people, I think it was Annie Cushing, said that, like, maybe Lori is trying to have a mistrial just so that she can, like, have more time to do this again. My only like, thought about that is, like, Lori is trying so hard to have a speedy trial. I mean, okay, she could either be trying to have a speedy trial to, like, you know, declare a mistrial. But also, I really think that, like, with all the stuff that she's talked about, the conditions in the jail, I really think that she doesn't want to be there anymore. So I really highly doubt that she wants to stay in Arizona longer. And she does kind of have a little bit of like, awareness when it comes to how long she's going to be in prison. I think that, the second interview she had on TV, they were like, well, like, how are you prepared for life behind bars? And she did not say that she was gonna be exonerated like she said with Keith. Like, I really think that she knows that she's not gonna be there forever. So, I don't know. I don't know if she's gonna do appeal. I mean, I'm sure there's gonna be appeals because she did do appeals in Idaho, but is she willing to be extradited back to Arizona if that happens? I don't think so. Or is she willing to stay in Arizona if for another trial after Brandon Boudreaux's? I hope to God not. I think so many family members are just done with you know, this trial and just you know, want this to be over so that they can not go on with their lives, but like heal, and think about this, because a lot of people have said, I think Case said this like, on Kresha's channel, like she's just so exhausted. Like she said, she spent all day in bed after testifying. And it was just, like a 10-minute testimony. And yeah. Anyway. Um, so yeah, I'm glad that this live, my first ever live, is like not out of the way, but um went well. Thank you for sticking with me. Also, I hope the sound is working. I tested my mic, but there's no way for me to hear it until I like rewatch it. Maybe it's just me talking to myself for like an hour. Yeah, thank you for sticking with me. Like I said, on this channel, expect more content like, just commentary. I mainly made this channel because I talk about true crime all the time. I watch true crime. I really like when I have like conversations with my family members, especially my sister, it's like a mini podcast. So and I made a true crime club in my town and like, all this stuff. So I just I don't know. I've talked about true crime like my whole life, and I think that, you know, there's times where I'm watching or listening to podcasts and I have this thought, and it's almost like I'm having this like mini commentary in my head where I'm having like this little mini podcast, and I'm like, maybe I should just talk about it on YouTube. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. I also think there's like a lot of other things like, like maybe more mundane or macabre or like less macabre than, true crime that maybe we could go into in the future. I do want to talk about the Delphi trial because that's another trial that I was very interested in. Actually, the first, I was gonna say episode, the first meeting of my true crime club that I had, I we talked about that trial, and new things are being released, and I want to talk about the confession calls and the not the confessions, interrogation footage because I think that's very insightful. I know there's a lot of controversy around it, but like, maybe that's like the perks of having a smaller channel. Like I don't think anybody's gonna like, come after me. But I do want to talk about that stuff too. If you are interested and talk about other things. Like I said, I have a background in religious studies. I'm not religious, but I used to be, and I am interested in this whole, connection with visions of glory and um this whole LDS aspect. So that's something interesting to talk about. I also, like talk about cults and all that stuff. Anyway, I'm just rambling now. It's time for me to go to bed. It's time for me to go to work tomorrow. I don't want to go to work tomorrow. Anyway, um, and I will see y'all later. Yeah. Anyway, don't expect like formalities. I dislike goodbyes and hellos. So I just did it because this is my first video, and if I just like started talking, then y'all would be like, "What the heck is this weird person doing?" Anyway, yeah, I will see you guys in the next one. And yeah, welcome to the deep dive. I hope you enjoyed. Comment, like, subscribe, do whatever you want to do. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.